In an explosive on-air confrontation that has Hollywood reeling, Ben Affleck stormed off the set of Jimmy Kimmel Live after the host's persistent jabs crossed the line from comedy into cruelty. What began as a standard promotional appearance quickly descended into one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night television history, leaving audience members stunned and social media ablaze. The tension was palpable from the moment Affleck took his seat opposite Kimmel. The actor, appearing to promote his latest directorial project, was greeted with what initially seemed like Kimmel's trademark sarcastic humor, but keen-eyed viewers noticed immediately that something was off. Kimmel's smile didn't reach his eyes, and his opening quips carried an unusual edge. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the man who's directed more flops than a fish out of water," Kimmel began, his voice dripping with barely concealed disdain rather than the playful tone typically expected. The audience's laughter was hesitant, scattered with uncomfortable murmurs. Affleck, a veteran of the promotional circuit, attempted to laugh it off, responding with a practiced smile. "Good to see you too, Jimmy. Always appreciate your warm welcomes." The interview began with standard questions about Affleck's new film, but Kimmel seemed determined to steer the conversation toward more personal territory. He referenced Affleck's previous marriage to Jennifer Lopez, despite the publicist's explicit request to avoid the topic. "So Ben, another project, another comeback attempt," Kimmel said, leaning forward. "Speaking of comebacks that didn't quite work out, let's talk about your relationship with J.Lo. Round 2 didn't last much longer than round 1, did it?" The audience gasped. Affleck's face hardened, but he maintained his composure. "I'm here to talk about the film, Jimmy. You know the rules." "Rules?" Kimmel laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the suddenly silent studio. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Your love life gets more screen time than your movies these days." Affleck shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw tightening. "Let's focus on the work, shall we? This film represents years of what? Trying to prove you're more than just a tabloid headline?" Kimmel interrupted, his tone increasingly antagonistic. "Come on, Ben. Your last 3 directorial efforts bombed harder than that Batman suit you couldn't wait to get out of." The cameras caught the exact moment Affleck's professional veneer began to crack. He placed his water glass down with deliberate care, his knuckles white against the transparent surface. Behind the scenes, producers were frantically signaling Kimmel to ease off, but the host seemed to be on a mission. "You know what, Jimmy? I've always appreciated how this show supports artists and their work," Affleck said carefully. "But tonight feels different. What's going on here?" Rather than backing down, Kimmel doubled down. "Nothing's going on. I'm just not as easily charmed by the Affleck rehabilitation tour as some other hosts might be. You come on these shows expecting softballs, but maybe it's time someone asked the tough questions." The tension in the studio was becoming unbearable. Audience members exchanged uncomfortable glances, and a strange hush fell over the typically boisterous crowd. Kimmel's bandleader attempted to break the tension with a musical sting, but Kimmel waved him off. "Tough questions? About a film you haven't seen?" Affleck countered, his voice dangerously quiet. "Or are you referring to my personal life, which has nothing to do with my work?" "Oh, come on," Kimmel scoffed. "Your personal life is why half of these people watch your movies. Let's not pretend otherwise." A commercial break couldn't come soon enough, but when it did, viewers at home had no idea of the heated exchange that continued off-camera. According to studio audience members who later posted about the incident, Affleck stood up during the break, removing his microphone and appearing ready to leave. One production assistant was overheard pleading, "Please, Ben, just 5 more minutes. He'll stick to the film questions." But Kimmel, rather than using the break to reset the interview's tone, approached Affleck with the same combative energy. "Sit down, Ben. The audience paid to see a show, not a temper tantrum." Affleck, his face flushed with anger but his voice controlled, responded just loudly enough for nearby audience members to hear, "They came to see an interview, not a public humiliation. What's your problem tonight? When the cameras began rolling, again the tension between the two men was unmistakable. Affleck had returned to his seat, but his body language screamed discomfort. Arms crossed, leaning away from Kimmel, his usual charismatic smile nowhere to be seen. Kimmel, seeming to enjoy the discomfort he was causing, launched into what appeared to be an ambush. So before the break, we were discussing your interesting career choices. Let's talk about your time in rehab. How many stints was it again? I've lost count. The audience fell completely silent. This wasn't entertainment. It was witnessing someone being deliberately cruel under the guise of comedy. Affleck's struggles with alcohol had been well documented, but his recovery journey had been equally public and successful. This line of questioning wasn't just inappropriate, it was malicious. Affleck took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing. Jimmy, I've been very open about my recovery journey. It's something I'm proud of, but I'm curious, what exactly are you trying to accomplish here tonight? Just having a conversation, Kimmel replied with a shrug, though his eyes remained cold. Isn't that what these shows are for? Real talk? Real talk, Affleck echoed, incredulity creeping into his voice. This feels more like a character assassination than a conversation. Did I do something to offend you? The tension crackled between them, electric and dangerous. Kimmel's usual smooth demeanor had given way to something uglier, more personal. Whatever was driving this behavior remained unclear. But as the seconds ticked by, it became increasingly evident that this wasn't just an awkward interview. It was an impending disaster. Actually, Ben, Kimmel continued, leaning forward with a predatory smile, I've been thinking about your latest project. Interesting how you always portray these deeply flawed men seeking redemption. Art imitating life, I suppose? The dig was unmistakable. Affleck's hand tightened around the armrest of his chair, his knuckles whitening. Everyone brings their experiences to their work, Jimmy. That's what creates authenticity. But I'm curious, what's behind this hostility tonight? This isn't like you, Kimmel's eyes flashed. Not like me? You don't know me, Ben. This fancy friendship we pretend to have for the cameras. Let's not kid ourselves. The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the playful banter they'd come to expect from the show. This was something raw and uncomfortable, a public unraveling of whatever professional relationship had existed between the two men. Fair enough, Affleck responded, his voice level despite the visible tension in his shoulders. But I've always respected your show, your platform. I'm just trying to understand what changed. What changed? Kimmel repeated, his laugh hollow. Maybe I'm tired of the celebrity circus. Maybe I'm tired of actors like you coming on my show, expecting me to fawn over whatever vanity project you're pushing this month. The camera caught a producer frantically signaling from offstage, drawing a finger across his throat. Cut, cut, cut. But Kimmel either didn't see or chose to ignore the warning. You know what's ironic, Ben? Kimmel continued, seemingly unable to stop himself. You play all these tough guys on screen, but everyone in Hollywood knows the truth. The drinking, the relationships, the meltdowns. You're not Batman. You're barely keeping it together. A collective gasp swept through the studio. This wasn't entertainment. It was cruelty masquerading as candid conversation. Even Kimmel's most loyal audience members appeared shocked by the viciousness of the attack. Affleck sat perfectly still for several seconds, his face unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but carried throughout the suddenly silent. Studio! You know, Jimmy, I came here tonight out of respect. For you, for your audience, for this platform. I've been on this show more times than I can count, and I've always appreciated what seemed like a mutual respect. Affleck paused, collecting himself, clearly choosing his words with care. But this isn't comedy. It's not even good television. It's just mean. Something flickered across Kimmel's face, a momentary crack in his hostile facade. But it vanished quickly. Oh, Did I hurt the movie star's feelings? Should I have stuck to the pre-approved questions from your publicist? Affleck shook his head slowly. This isn't about questions. Ask me anything about my work. That's fair game. But this personal attack? I'm trying to understand what I did to deserve this. Deserve? Kimmel's eyes narrowed. You celebrities think you deserve special treatment everywhere you go. The adoration, the protection, the kid glove interviews. Maybe it's time someone told the truth. What truth is that, Jimmy? Affleck challenged, leaning forward. What exactly are you trying to say? The studio had fallen so silent that the sound of a water glass being placed on the table echoed like a gunshot. The cameras, which normally would have cut away to audience reactions or commercial breaks during such an uncomfortable exchange, remained fixed on the two men, capturing the unfolding drama in excruciating detail. The truth, Kimmel said, his voice dripping with contempt, is that your comeback story is a carefully crafted PR narrative. The devoted father, the serious director, the reformed bad boy. It's all an act, isn't it? Something dangerous flashed in Affleck's eyes. My children are not part of this conversation, he said, his voice dropping to a warning growl. Whatever issue you have with me, that's a line you don't cross. Behind the scenes, chaos had erupted. The show's executive producer was frantically speaking into his headset, presumably to the control room. A publicist had appeared from backstage, hovering anxiously at the edges of the set. But the cameras kept rolling, capturing what was quickly becoming one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. Or what? Kimmel challenged, seemingly emboldened by Affleck's restraint. You'll what, Ben? Storm off? Go ahead. It wouldn't be the first time you've walked away when things got difficult. The barb, clearly referencing Affleck's personal life, landed, like a physical blow. For a moment it seemed as though Affleck might actually lunge across the desk that separated them. Instead, he took a deep breath, his jaw working silently as he regained control. You know what amazes me, Jimmy? He finally said, his voice calm despite the storm clearly raging beneath the surface. I've spent years working on myself, being accountable for my mistakes, trying to be better. And somehow that makes me a target. Meanwhile, people like you sit in judgment, never looking at your own behavior. The tables were turning, and Kimmel seemed to sense it. For the first time since the interview began, he looked slightly uncomfortable. This isn't about me, he deflected. Isn't it? Affleck countered, gaining momentum. Because from where I'm sitting, this seems very personal. Did I decline an invitation to your barbecue? Forget to send a Christmas card? Or is this just what happens when your ratings start slipping and you need a viral moment? The camera caught Kimmel's expression hardening at the mention of ratings. A sore point, perhaps, considering recent reports of declining viewership. Before he could respond, however, the network finally intervened. The "going to break" music swelled louder than usual, an unmistakable signal that the producers were forcing a commercial. The red lights on the cameras blinked off, but the tension in the studio remained electric. Affleck immediately removed his microphone, dropping it onto the seat cushion with controlled precision. That's it, he said quietly, standing up. I'm done. Kimmel, seemingly startled by Affleck's decision, rose from behind his desk. You're walking off my show? Really, Ben? Proving my point about not handling pressure? The studio audience, witnessing what was clearly no longer part of the planned entertainment, sat in stunned silence. Several producers rushed onto the set, one approaching Affleck while another spoke urgently to Kimmel. Mr. Affleck, please, the young producer pleaded. We can reset after the break. Fresh questions, strictly about the film. But Affleck shook his head, his decision clearly made. I've done over 30 of these shows with Jimmy. Never once has it been like this. I don't know what's going on with him tonight, but I won't be part of it. Kimmel, ignoring his producer's attempt to calm him, called across the set. That's right, run away. God forbid someone asks you an honest question instead of kissing your ass. The outburst was so unprofessional that several audience members audibly gasped. A woman in the front row was seen gathering her belongings, apparently unwilling to continue watching the spectacle. Others followed suit, creating a ripple of movement through the previously captivated crowd. Affleck paused, turning back to face Kimmel one last time. The two men locked eyes across the set, the tension between them palpable even to viewers watching the smartphones recording the off-air confrontation. "You know what's sad, Jimmy?" Affleck said, his voice steady despite the visible anger in his expression. "I actually considered you a friend. Whatever's going on with you, whatever made you think this kind of public ambush was acceptable, I hope you work through it, but not at my expense." For a brief moment, something that looked remarkably like shame flickered across Kimmel's face, but it quickly hardened back into defiance. "You celebrities are all the same," he said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier venom. "Can't handle anything but adoration." What happened next would later be described by audience members as the moment the power dynamic shifted completely. Rather than responding with anger, Affleck laughed, a genuine, almost sympathetic sound that seemed to catch Kimmel off guard. "This isn't about celebrity, Jimmy. It's about basic human decency. Something you seem to have forgotten tonight." Affleck glanced around the studio, acknowledging the audience for the first time since the interview had gone off the rails. "I apologize to everyone who came expecting an actual conversation about cinema. That's clearly not what tonight is about." With that, he turned and walked off the set, ignoring the frantic pleas of the show's executive producer. The studio descended into chaos. Some audience members began leaving their seats, while others pulled out phones to record the unprecedented meltdown of one of late night's most established hosts. Kimmel, suddenly aware that he'd lost control not just of his guest, but of his audience, attempted to salvage the situation. "Well, folks," he called out, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his most devoted fans, "I guess some people can't take a joke. We'll be right back after these messages." But the damage was done. Social media was already exploding with clips from audience members' phones, most of them critical of Kimmel's behavior. Kimmel crossed the line began trending within minutes, followed quickly by Dutcher Team Affleck. When the show returned from commercial, Kimmel sat alone at his desk, visibly uncomfortable. The forced smile he offered the camera was a poor imitation of his usual confident grin. "So, Ben Affleck has left the building," he began, attempting to laugh off the incident. "Some people just can't handle a little honest conversation." The joke fell flat. The previously enthusiastic audience now sat in awkward silence, the energy in the room irretrievably altered. Even Kimmel's most reliable supporters in the front row, the fans who laughed at every joke, no matter how weak, seemed reluctant to encourage him. "We'll be right back with our musical guest," Kimmel continued, his voice strained. But as the cameras pulled back for a wide shot, the damage became visibly apparent. Several rows of the audience seating were now conspicuously empty, abandoned by viewers who had chosen to walk out in apparent solidarity with Affleck. Behind the scenes, the situation deteriorated further. According to staff members who later spoke anonymously to entertainment reporters, Kimmel exploded at his production team once the cameras stopped rolling again. "This is your fault," he reportedly shouted at his executive producer. "You should have prepped him better. You knew the questions I wanted to ask." But the truth, as would emerge in the following days, was that no one on the production team had been warned about Kimmel's planned ambush. The pre-interview had covered the standard promotional topics, with no indication of the personal attacks that had blindsided not just Affleck, but Kimmel's own staff. Outside the studio, Affleck was intercepted by waiting paparazzi, alerted by audience members' social media posts about the unfolding drama. "Ben, what happened in there?" one shouted, cameras flashing in the darkened parking lot. Affleck paused, considering his response carefully. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, dignified, a stark contrast to the chaos he'd left behind. "Sometimes people have bad days," he said simply. "Tonight Jimmy had a really bad day. I wish him well, but I wasn't going to sit there and be a punching bag." With that statement, gracious yet firm, Affleck slipped into the waiting SUV, leaving Kimmel to deal with the aftermath of what would quickly become one of the most talked-about meltdowns in late-night television history. By morning, the clip had gone viral. Entertainment news programs played the confrontation on repeat. Media analysts dissected Kimmel's bizarre behavior, and celebrities rushed to social media to express support for Affleck's decision to walk away from the hostile interview. For Kimmel, the fallout was swift and severe. Major celebrities began canceling scheduled appearances, unwilling to risk similar treatment. Network executives called emergency meetings, and by the following afternoon something unprecedented occurred. Jimmy Kimmel, for the first time in his career, issued a public apology.